Hello and welcome to another edition of the Same Old Stripes podcast. Crazy week here on the Same Old Stripes podcast. Lots going on for you guys. You probably already saw it earlier in the week, but we released an interview with Orlando Brown Jr. Great guest. You can check that out now. It's on YouTube. It's all on the channels. But Billy Tio and I also interviewed Evan McPhillips, and you're going to be catching that at the back end of this episode. Billy's not with us now. He has a child forced to do homework, and I don't envy him. But Tio's joined us. Me, I should say. Tio, checking in with you. We just got those interviews done. How are things with you, man? Obviously, it's been a busy evening for both of us.
Yeah, I think Same Old Stripes on cloud nine right now, man. It's kind of crazy that from the beginning of the time where we started to where we are now, and getting a guy like Orlando Brown is pretty incredible for us. And man, when you guys listen to that interview, he is one of the funniest people I've had the honor of meeting in 10 short minutes.
Yeah, when he was talking about the I should have told teams that I told him I was going to be the worst tester there. I should have told him it was going to be the worst of all time. I should have just told him. That had me rolling. Obviously, Orlando Brown Jr. interview, awesome. Great stuff, man. I'm so fired up for people to hear that.
I am too, man. I think it's a good introduction to the Bengals fan base, and I think he's already feeling the love that he's getting from us, compared to what he was getting maybe in Kansas City, especially at the end there. You can kind of see where the fans were going with that. So,
yep. And so we talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about this Orlando Brown Jr. signing, but today's episode is kind of going to be about the other pieces the Bengals have added in time since. And I think we talked about Nick Scott as well, but yesterday, as we're talking now, this episode will come out later in the week, but the Bengals made 3 moves, kind of interesting altogether. So the first one was a deal that I actually thought they already got done. They re-signed Trent Taylor. Nothing super crazy there. Then they signed Sidney Jones, who I think that it was okay, well, that's something. That's a nice little depth piece. And then they signed Irv Smith Jr. While I'm asleep, you and Billy are still awake feeling the hype. All those are 1-year deals, but it really fleshes out some of the roster needs. Then there's also the connection going on with Ezekiel Elliott. And I think, Tio, that's where I want to start with you. So out of the blue, late last week, Adam Schefter tweets, Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott has narrowed down his options about where to play to the Eagles, the Jets, and the Bengals, and would like to make his decision about where to sign by the end of the week next week. Crazy, just weird. I think the Joe Burrow effect is definitely in full effect on this one. But your thoughts on a potential Ezekiel Elliott fit, and do you think this gets done? I mean, what level of interest do you think as a Bengals fan they have in this?
I don't know, man. Zack Taylor's comment made it seem like it was more of a wish list than more of a report, I guess. I don't know, man. That's a super tough question, honestly. And the reason it's tough is because you still got this Mixon situation. I think you pointed it out perfectly on Twitter. There's not room for both of them. They're the same type of back, running style-wise. Obviously, Zeke can actually pass protect compared to where the coaches don't even trust Mixon to do it. And I know there's people that will say, well, he just doesn't have the opportunity to show that he can pass protect. There's a reason for that. The coaches don't trust him to do that. Same way they don't trust Chris Evans to be on the field. It is what it is. And then I think another tweet that you sent out is perfect. Running backs don't matter, man.
Nope, they don't. Running backs don't matter.
They don't. And like I said earlier, if Mixon was my brother, I would still tell him that it's over, man. It's over.
Yep.
You got to be willing to accept a complimentary role at this point in your career. Same thing with all the running backs. Look at Aaron Jones. He took a pay cut to stay on his team. And it's just the way the league's shifting, man. As far as Zeke, man, I don't know. What's he going to sign for? $3 million? Sure. I've never been a huge Zeke guy. I think he's kind of like Mixon, where it's just not explosive anymore. Yeah, do you want him in that third down? Not really, because if he catches the ball, he's not breaking any tackles.
It's 3rd and 3, maybe.
Yeah, so I think it was Goodberry that pointed out a few years ago that it's stupid for teams in the top 10 to draft a running back because you are wasting their most valuable carries in their first 4 or 5 year window. Because after that, running backs go downhill. I'm kind of in that train too, where if a guy like Bijan Robinson falls at 28, take him. You have A+ running back for 5 years. Franchise tag him, get that 6 year. Goodbye, restart. And that's just where I'm at this point. What about you? What are you thinking?
To me, so first of all, I'm 100% on running backs don't matter. You can't have Mixon and P. Ryan. Those are just Mixon and P. Ryan. Freudian slip. You can't have Mixon and Zeke together. It just doesn't make any sense. The one thing I will say about Zeke that I think is interesting is if he's willing to play for a cheap deal and he's willing to accept that role as, and honestly, it's even maybe a little bit smaller than Samaje P. Ryan. Just because I think I like what Samaje P. Ryan brought a little bit more as a pure runner than Ezekiel Elliott, which is crazy to say at this time and era. But I mean, we've spoken about Ezekiel Elliott tongue in cheek on this podcast in the past. So, but I think he's an interesting fit in the RB2 role. You don't have a guy right now. If you're going to move on from Mixon anyway, I mean, having a guy that has had some skins on the wall and Ezekiel Elliott being the backup to a guy like, just to throw a name out there, Tajay Spears, Eric Gray, Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown, pick your flavor of running back. I think that's an interesting thing. That's the only thing I'll say with that. And it would have to be cheap.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I know people suggest maybe keeping them together, but it really doesn't make sense. And the same thing why it didn't work with P. Ryan and Mixon. It was fine, but that's all it was. No team was scared of either back, and that's why they stayed in too high the whole time. You need someone that can scare a defense enough to maybe give you a one high look, and once you do that, Burrow's going to cook.
Yes, sir. Burrow will cook that. Speaking of Joe Burrow cooking, hopefully with some one high safeties going up against this guy because he can find those soft spots on the defense. Irv Smith Jr. Joining the Bengals, former second-round pick, Alabama product. Lots of pedigree. Obviously, the injury concerns, a little undersized. Definitely smaller than Hayden Hurst, but nothing crazy compared to what the Bengals have had in recent years. What did you think about that fit, given the way this tight end market unfolded? Did you like that option they ultimately ended up on, considering some of the guys that went off the board, in the first 2 weeks of this process? Just kind of give me your feel on signing Irv Smith and kind of where it leaves the Bengals in 2023.
I'm excited, man. I think that's my second favorite signing so far this offseason. And the reason being, now it takes a lot of pressure off of 28, pick 28. You don't have to go tight end if you know there's a guy there that you don't absolutely love. Say Musgrave's there at 28 and you don't love him. I don't love him. Now you don't have to reach and take him. And you kind of save it for the second or third round. Like I said, I love Sam Laporta. I'll die on that hill. I think he's going to be the best tight end out of this class. And if he's there at 60, that'd be awesome pairing. But yeah, I think it's a good signing, man. It's low risk, high reward. Obviously, he hasn't been healthy ever. But if he does stay healthy, he's going to put up a career year, and then he's going to sign next year in the offseason for $30 million with some team. So I think it's a good signing, man. I think it takes a lot of pressure off going into the draft. What are your thoughts on Irv?
We're going to get into a lot of it with Evan McPhillips here in just a second, but my feeling on Irv Smith is I think I like the gamble. I think it has a higher ceiling than the Hayden Hurst signing just because of the pedigree of play you're getting with Irv Smith. He's very athletic in terms of what he can bring to a passing offense in particular. I just think there's a little more verticality that you're going to be able to find in that game. And potentially a guy that can maybe get in the end zone a little more often. Billy pointed out in our text recently, Hayden Hurst had 2 or 3 touchdowns in the entire season? 2 touchdowns? Man, that's not that impressive. I think those touchdowns came relatively early in the year. A couple drops in the end zone. Irv Smith's, the clips I've watched, really good at converting in the red space, and that's huge to me. If you can have a little more red zone conversion from your tight end position, I think that's all I need to know. We're going to go quickly here because we're going to talk about all this in just a minute with Evan McPhillips, like I mentioned, but I have it in my notes as Sidney Brown. Another Freudian slip. No, but Sidney Jones is obviously the other guy the Bengals went out and grabbed. The Eli Apple conversation is probably dead as a result of this deal because I think the Bengals are probably going to pick a corner that will take up that last role on the roster. I could even see them double dipping at corner, honestly, just depending on what they like. So I just don't see a path for Eli Apple to return. But I like Sidney Jones, the player. He's a guy that I liked coming out of Washington a little bit. He's a guy that I've been interested in picking up a couple of the times he's been available to teams because he has changed teams a few times. But that's a lot to do with injury, honestly. It's not as much to do with, what he's actually done when he's healthy on the field. Mm-hmm. Not the best coverage year last year with the Raiders, but the Raiders were just kind of a mess across the board last season. So, Theo, I know you love corners. Give me your thoughts on Sidney Brown. I did it again. Sidney Jones and
I do like Sidney Brown, though.
I like Sidney Brown, too. Maybe that's why I want to talk about him so much.
No, Sidney Jones, I think it's a slight upgrade from Eli. I think it's a big upgrade from Eli Apple, honestly.
Yeah, in terms of a ceiling, I think for sure.
I think in the right system, I think Sidney can be a really good player. Just like Lou Anarumo got the best out of Eli Apple, whose career was dead. Like, he was on the outside looking in. And all I gotta say is if it's a Lou guy, I completely trust Lou. He's a quarterback whisperer. If that's a guy who he was pounding the table for to get, I'm all for it. And obviously you're probably not going to ask him to start every single game this season. But if he has to fill that Eli Apple role, I think he's going to be great at it.
Yeah. One little note I wanted to add, because I just saw this on Twitter. Jeff Hobson reports that it came down to the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals for Irv Smith Jr. So as Sidney Jones joined Cincinnati to come chase the championship with a nice depth role, as does Irv Smith, a place where he, Peter Schrager reported that he wanted to go because of the opportunity to win championships with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all the boys.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So,
Miami doesn't really have a starting tight end either, but I think he probably watched what happened to Mike Gesicki last year, and he's like, hell no.
If I got to pick, I'm going to go somewhere I'm going to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Tua or Burrow?
Yeah, I think we've run that simulation in the past plenty of times, and we all know where it lands.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take you guys now to Evan McPhillips. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoy this interview, and we hope you enjoy the interview with Orlando Brown as well. But now, Evan McPhillips. All right. Joining us now on the Same Old Stripes podcast. Somehow the first time he's been on the show. I can't believe I haven't asked him before. But he is the co-host of the Sitdown, presented by First Star Logistics on the Right Way Network. Evan McPhillips, first of all, thanks so much for coming on. Welcome to the show, Matt. How's your life going right now? It seems like things are really busy over on the at the Right Way Sports Network.
Yes, they are, man. We've got a shiny new co-host in Jules, who's been killing it for us on the sit down on our Monday shows at 7 p.m. And we've been doing a little bit of our, State of the Jungle nod for the Bengals and the Bengals fans on Wednesday at 7. So we got a little treat for everyone tomorrow or today, depending on when you're listening to this. At 7, we're going to have John Sheeran join us, and we're going to do a live mock draft and interact with the fans. And we want them to draft along with us and kind of tell us where we went wrong, which I'm sure people will all agree that we made the best picks and no one will disagree, right? But no, we got a lot of stuff going on, man, and we're hoping to bring you guys a lot of content, get some live events going, just really get out, meet the fans. And I'm sure you guys know so many good people out there supporting the shows, and it's great. It means the world to us,
Yeah, Bengals Nation showing up strong in numbers and a very friendly bunch. Good people in the Bengals community. It'll be very fun for you guys. Hopefully the contentious Twitter debates don't take it into the live event. I can't imagine they will. That's not how people talk to each other in person.
No.
So I had you on the show because I really wanted to talk to you about some of these free agency moves the Bengals have made over the last couple of weeks. And I think we have to start with the one that happened most recently. It happened while I was asleep. I don't know if anyone else was asleep, but yeah. Bengals signed Irv Smith last night, and it solved a little bit. I guess it solved their absolute dearth of pass-catching tight ends for now.
Great way to put it.
Yeah. I think the way I want to ask this question to you first is, how much of a decline or what kind of difference do you see in Irv Smith versus Hayden Hurst as a player as of now? I mean, do you see much of a steep drop off? Because, I mean, when I first look at it, as long as Irv Smith stays healthy, which really is the thing, there's a chance you might be getting a little bit of an upgrade in this whole draw.
You just might, and particularly in the kind of athleticism category. All credit to Hayden Hurst. I mean, but the guy is also 30. He's pushing the back end of his career. Coming out as a little bit of an older prospect anyways. He tested like a good athlete, but he just did not threaten teams vertically. And I think you've seen that despite the injury, hat tip to Andrew Russell for finding this stat earlier, that the explosive play rate over the last 3 seasons, Irv Smith, 21.4%, CJ Uzoma, 18.2%, and Hayden Hurst at 17.6%. So it's not a stretch to say that Irv Smith gives them the most explosive pass catching option that they have. This is not to say that he's blowing off the line or anything, but his build-up speed is definitely threatening the linebackers, and he can definitely use his larger frame against some of these smaller defenders. So he gives you a little bit more of a receiving threat. He is a little bit more undersized than Hayden Hurst. I think he was about 2 inches and about 20 pounds smaller, a little bit undersized, but that doesn't necessarily always show up in the blocking. When you get him in space and you get him on the move, he can use his speed to kind of ramp up and compensate for that lack of size and that lack of strength. So I don't know that you're really going to be losing a lot in the blocking department to size, despite him being a smaller tight end comparatively to Hurst. But I do think you get that added dynamic element that can attack the seam, that can challenge the wheel routes on the boundary, that can really give them a little bit of versatility, a little bit more of dynamism there at that position, which they desperately needed. And the guy's 24. There's still plenty of room to grow. We know injuries have kind of stunted him a little bit, and tight end is one of those positions that takes a couple years for most guys anyways, a lot like offensive line. It's one of those that's very complicated with the different nuances of the routes you're running, to the different blocking schemes and different challenges of the blocking assignments. I mean, these are grown men that have been in NFL weight programs for years. These are guys who have developed their technique past what you've seen in college. So it's not a stretch to say that it takes a lot of tight ends 2 to 3 years anyways to hit the ground running. And I think the situation, the value, everything just meets really well for the Bengals here.
Yeah, and as you're kind of going along there, I'm kind of forming a narrative in my head. First of all, undersized tight end. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do with this conversation, boys. Irv Smith Jr. is the Ed Boss in the Bengals offense. It's going to be 2019 LSU all over again, folks. It's going to be records. Now, I really like the way you kind of broke that down. I think the athleticism thing is so huge. Mm-hmm. The size thing, I'm interested to see how that plays out, because there are some Bengals fans out there that are still looking for the heyday of Tyler Eifert, where it's the big guy going over the middle and catching the crazy vertical touchdown.
These are human teams, man. That size and athleticism, there's a reason he went in the first round. And there are some guys with that athleticism that maybe don't have the profile of some of these guys, like a Kyle Pitts or an Eifert or a Hawkinson, that, didn't have a lot of these red flags or question marks. But there's definitely some of those bigger athletic guys that you can get, man. I mean, I know Kuntz is a big fan favorite recently. It's the RAS looks great on him. I mean, Kraft looks good too. Kraft. Yeah,
it is Kraft.
I always get him and Tyler Croft confused.
Yeah, that's my thing with him. I can't draft him because of that name. I really can't. I'm out on Kraft.
Oh my god!
It's too close to Tyler Croft, man.
I've already had to create a mnemonic device in my head for trying to separate Darnell Washington and Darnell Wright, because you talk about both of them so much, it's easy to get it wrong. So I'm like, Darnell Wright plays right tackle. Even he played a little bit of left tackle, didn't go as well. He's probably a right tackle, but I've got to say that to myself every time to make sure I don't botch that one.
Yeah, the left tackles. Yeah, don't watch the Darnell Wright left tackle tape. It'll make you hate Darnell.
Throw it out. It's fine.
But you were kind of naturally transitioning to it anyway. I don't have this on the list, but I was just kind of curious as you were kind of rattling them off. Who are some of the tight ends you really like in this draft as Bengals fits? I know that's vague because there's a lot of tight ends in this class that a lot of different people. I mean, it really is kind of like your favorite flavor of ice cream with them.
Right.
But just off your head and some of the players you've watched, who do you really like in this class among the some of the really exciting players that are included?
Man, Kuntz is probably like my favorite, like mid-round, like stab at it. If you're talking like after the first round with the obvious Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta is a really interesting receiving option that I really like. And again, we're looking for that dynamic weapon, right? I think you feel a little bit better about having a tight end who can at least hold up as a blocker now that you have Irv. And sure, he's coring more of your receiving move tight end, but I don't think you're necessarily going to say, let's not draft a dynamic weapon because we have Irv Smith for a year, right? Those are definitely two of my favorite options between Laporta and Kuntz. I just think that's kind of maybe your second round guy. I don't think Laporta makes it back around to the end of the third round there where they pick again. So that's tough. Might be a little bit of a reach depending on how you view it, where he's at on the board. Fortunately, at least they're not sitting there staring with a glaring need to get 2 tight ends in the draft. At least they kind of assuage that need a little bit, address that dearth, as you put it, kind of frees them up a little bit and kind of puts the crosshairs at other positions, maybe in the first round. If the darling child, Michael Mayer, is not sitting on the board.
Can I interject real quick, Evan? And
yeah,
I kind of said this earlier today, and I want to hear your kind of take on it.
Mm-hmm.
With the Irv Smith signing, I personally just see, we're not going to touch on the running back thing, but I really see running back and tight end on this team being like a revolving door over the next 3-year period. With the Orlando Brown signing and the hopes of hopefully getting 9 that inked before the season, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask Willie, it's pretty close, but who knows? But I think we've really kind of, I think Duke has really made it seem that the big 3 of T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow is going to be the core of this team going forward. And I don't know about you, like I love that decision. I love kind of putting our feet in the ground and saying this is us and this is how we're going to ride.
Right.
What's your take on the possibility of, if you're not in love with the tight end at 28, if you do a trade back or if you get a mid-level guy, or it's just kind of what we get a guy in who we kind of hoped Drew Sample could be, of a good blocking tight end, and we're kind of just receiving guys left and right every year who's the best in the market that we can throw $4 or $5 million at.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's an excellent point. And I think you see kind of with this free agency period, especially the Bengals kind of putting their foot down on what positions they do and don't value, right? Look at where all the money is allocated on the defense. It's in that front 7, right? They highly value that. And I think they believe that Lou Anarumo can do the most with the defensive backs that they can get, right? We know he's the DB whisperer. He has managed player after player, stop after stop to get the most out of the defensive backs that he has. It seems like such a simple concept, but he is so good at just saying, what are your strengths? And let me put you in a position to be successful, right? I'm not going to put you on an island and ask you to carry a guy up the line if you can't do that, right? There may be instances where we have to do that in coverage, but I'm not going to repeatedly ask you to do that and make you look worse and our defense look worse. Whereas some coaches are saying, if you just execute my scheme, just do this, it'll work. So Credit to him on that. I think you see that with Von Bell, with Jesse Bates. They said safety is a position we're not going to value. I think you see that with tight end and running back, like you said. Those are places they've notably address that they want to get cheaper, they want to get younger, and they want to get more athletic. And the best way to do that is through the draft, like you said. That or adding these guys who are these 24-year-olds, unproven guys with question marks, coming off of early contracts that teams didn't want to extend them. Sometimes people just need a change of scenery, right? You get a new regime in there. It's not the guy who drafted them. There's a bunch of different reasons that things just don't work out. And it's not always that the player's not talented, right? I think tight end is definitely one of those positions that you can do that. Safety is one of those positions you can do that. We've seen what the market looks like for them this season. And unfortunate what happened with Foster Moreau. But if they end up with Mike Gesicki or Foster Moreau, like, do you really feel bad about what you're doing in this offense when you have a Joe Burrow, a Jamar Chase, and a T. Higgins? So I think you made an excellent point. Those are positions that they feel are accessory pieces that come as complementary pieces that you can definitely cycle through and kind of pick the cream of the crop, if you will, because you will have guys who are looking to rehab their value, looking to play with a contender. And I think you can definitely capitalize on that for as long as you have Joe Burrow and everything going the way it is.
I love that. And I think where you put on like positions of value, I think out of respect, the contract offer went out to Jesse Bates, last year, just of like where we were. But, I've been an adamant, talker on the show of And there's nothing against it because of where he is in his career. If you want the money, go play in Arizona, go play in Atlanta, go play in Carolina. Because
Jamal Adams did the Deshaun Watson for the safety market.
He really did. He really did, man. He really did. But I agree, man. When you're at this level with your quarterback and your skill position players, like you have to put a hard cap on where your priorities are.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Bengals will probably stay relevant a little bit longer than maybe like the Chargers, for example. But
their cap hits next year are nightmarish. They've got like 4 guys making $5 million.
Them restructuring Khalil Mack might have been the dumbest decision of last season.
I agree. I love that take.
Whatever. Anyways, I'm gonna bounce right off Billy here. We're gonna stick with tight ends.
Flustered.
The Chargers, man. Chargers get me flustered, but no, I'm gonna bounce off Billy here. Evan, would you be surprised if the Bengals didn't address tight end in the first 2 rounds? And I guess not if it's not the first 2 rounds. I feel like it would almost have to be done in the 3rd round at that point.
Right. You definitely start to get into those options that are maybe solid but have less of the upside as soon as you start getting into the 4th round, 5th round. You don't necessarily want to take like a Will Mallory and take a shot on him. Or I know some people like Shoemaker out of Michigan. I think he's fine, but like we don't want fine, right? You want something a little more dynamic, and you are going to have to find that. It is a deeper class, but I think the 3rd round is kind of where you find that cutoff unless you can finagle your way into, if Kuntz falls, I know I keep bringing him up into the 4th or 5th round. That's the guy with athleticism and size that you take the chance on, right? Because we've seen even guys like George Kittle, I mean, Darren Waller, for example, though he had a non-traditional route there. We've seen it with Kyle Pitts with all the ability he has in the world. It's a tough position, and it consistently takes time for these guys to build on their wealth of knowledge and all the skills that you need as a tight end to fit in the modern day NFL. I don't think there's any problem with, like Billy mentioned earlier, where, hey, we're going to go ahead and just kind of continue to sign veterans for the next 2 or 3 years while we let our rookie kind of develop and see where we end up with that. I definitely think this is the class you can wait until the 2nd or 3rd round if you feel like there are better prospects at premium positions, because we talked about wanting to get younger, wanting to get cheaper. Great spots to do that are tackle, corner, and defensive end, which fortunately there's a lot of great talent at that in the 1st and 2nd round in this draft. The D linemen tested like freaks, absolute freaks in the athletic competition or in the athletic drills at the combine. You've got great cornerback prospects. I keep doing a bunch of voodoo magic to make sure that Deonte Banks somehow falls, but I don't think
good luck with that.
I know. I see all these different PFN mock draft simulators and stuff, and I'm just like, if only, right? But no, it's definitely, if you have, this is the advantage of addressing these needs in free agency, right? As much as a Sidney Jones or tight end Irv Smith don't seem to move the needle, they lessen that need to reach the urgency that you have, right? Which frees you up to take those falling players where, if God forbid Darnell Wright does fall into your lap at 28, well then shoot, you just solved your right tackle problem and you're happy for it, move on, right? If a guy does fall to you, a corner that you like, this is a class that you can get guys like a Julius Brents that you might feel better about in the 2nd or 3rd round who tested like crazy athletes. So you have these options at premium positions that are coming up as needs for the Bengals. So I wouldn't fault them, and I would completely understand the logic if they want to go defensive end, right tackle, and corner in the first 3 rounds and then circle back and hit their guy as a tight end in the 4th maybe. I think that would be a good strategy, and I also understand it with 2 cornerbacks under contract after this upcoming season. That's a position that you have to address. Right tackle is obviously a position. Sam Hubbard is obviously excellent run defender, Mr. Cincinnati. We love you, Sam, but pass rushing leaves a little bit to be desired. Trey Hendrickson's pushing up closer and closer to 30. So is DJ Reader. So you definitely need more juice than just Joseph Osai coming off the line there. So I absolutely would expect them to address that early. I'm really curious to see what they do with tight end. It almost feels like a luxury pick in the 1st round, wouldn't it? As much as Michael Mayer would be an excellent story, as much as you could probably just play Darnell Washington as an extra tackle in a lot of your sets that you want to do, like to me, it just doesn't feel right with this class taking one in the 1st round. So I would not panic at that point personally.
So I think we could put a bow on the tight end discussion now for for a minute because I think it's mostly because I have so many other ideas I want to go with. I could go down a rabbit hole with tight end, just like before the show started, we were going down a rabbit hole with running backs.
Yeah.
But I do want to turn now and look at the cornerback situation because, I mean, a little bit of the structure of the show, I don't really think Same Old Stripes is traditionally structured because we don't believe in that because we're dummies. I write an agenda every time and it doesn't do it. And I say that every episode, but we have an agenda. I'm not going to follow it. But here we are. The Sidney Jones signing to me is relatively interesting for all the reasons you mentioned above and all the reasons we thought the Irv Smith signing was interesting, except Sidney Jones is obviously going to be more of a depth piece, more of that what the initial idea of Eli Apple was when they brought Eli Apple in. Obviously, that went better than I think any Bengals fan really could have expected. And really anyone could have expected. I mean, come on, we're talking about Eli Apple as the guy that people wanted to keep around. There are Bengals fans. I don't think that's ever happened to the place Eli Apple's been. There are people, there's probably like at least 50% of the fan base that's like, we should keep this guy. Like,
people like the zest, man. People like
it. They're into it. Gotta love it. But obviously it's turning over to Sidney Jones now. A little less zest, which I think is okay a little bit. Lou Anarumo seems like
he's got plenty of zest on the field, though. Don't sell this man short.
He does. He brings the zest. He just doesn't do it on Twitter, which I think Anarumo really likes.
I think the Bengals might like that too.
Yes. So I'll let you kind of talk about two things in conjunction here. So first of all, what do you think about Sidney Jones, the player? And second of all, what do you think about the depth now of the Bengals cornerback room? Because we're definitely going to have to talk about them drafting a corner. It's going to happen. It sets up that way. So yeah, I'll leave that open to you. There's a lot of different directions you can go with that, I'm sure.
Right. I just want to kind of sing Sidney Jones' praise real quick, because obviously we talked about with Irv Smith and with other players how sometimes things just don't work out with what you've got, right? And it says a lot that when Sidney Jones left the Eagles, many Eagles fans were upset about it, and they were clamoring for him still. And he went to Jacksonville, I believe, and then Seattle, and he had 2 very good years with them, actually, 2 of the better years of his career, which kind of lends itself to what we were talking about before, where coaches sometimes go, hey, we're going to run this scheme, and you better be able to execute, and it's not always playing to their strengths. But he's only 27. We know what Lou has done for corners already. If he can stave off that injury bug that has kind of plagued him in a couple years, when you look back at just obviously, he got cut from Seattle, picked up by the Raiders. We know how horrendous the Raiders were this season. I don't want to hold it against him for this season when he's going through that kind of the tumult, the fluctuation there, right? Yeah. So looking back at his year in Seattle just 1 year ago, he ranked 62nd in snaps, okay? And despite playing fewer snaps than many corners, 20 of which played over 1,000 snaps, he ranked tied for 18th in total tackles and 32nd in defensive stops. Despite being 62nd in total snaps. And in that time, too, he ranked 15th out of 77 corners in missed tackle rate. So you get a guy who's physical, who is playing hard, has played good ball in other environments and other schemes outside of Philadelphia. He's a sure tackler. He's an aggressive, physical guy that I think really resonates with Lou. And so I just kind of wanted to pay that service because, I mean, it's when you see that and it's like, man, this guy played almost 300 snaps less than some of these guys and still was more productive against the run, didn't have the missed tackle rate that you sometimes get from these corners, which with how aggressive these corners are in this defense is definitely going to help. I think it's going to fit well in the Bengals scheme, and it's also going to bring out the best of Sidney Jones. So it's definitely a depth signing. It's a rehab signing for him where he wants to rehab his value. I don't want to make too much of it. It doesn't solve your long-term needs, but absolutely you need a depth at the boundary corner, and this is an excellent option that you can feel good about. With that all said, I think, like you kind of mentioned, the writing is on the wall for Eli Apple. I think this was his spot, and I think it was given to Sidney Jones. I hope like hell that they draft a corner in the first 2 or 3 rounds, right? And that strictly becomes from – I don't like to narrow in on positions and try and reach for anything, but when you look at the data, it says if you want a quality defensive end, if you want a quality corner, if you want a quality tackle, these guys are most often found in the first round versus guards, interior defensive line, safeties, linebackers. These are guys you can generally find in rounds 3 to 5 who can be good starters for you. So I just personally would like to see them do that. We talked about their corner need, how they only have 2 under contract, one of Mike's Hilton, who will be 30. Really dire. You don't want to go into an offseason needing 3 corners, right? Not great. And asking rookies to play in that position, which is a really tough position to play in the NFL. We saw how Jeff Okudah struggled in his time, despite all the athleticism. It's tough. It's hard. So I like the signing for Sidney Jones. I love the signing for the Bengals. Eli Apple, probably less enthusiastic about the signing than anyone else. Eli, you played well in your 2 years, a lot better than anyone expected. Thank you for your service. Wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Yeah, hey, I'm gonna sneak in here real quick because cornerback's kind of it's my favorite position. That's what I learned in high school, and it's just something I've always kept an eye on in college and the NFL. But Evan, I kind of want to know who your specific guys are. My guy this year is Jarvis Martin out of Illinois. He's a slot / safety. And he's super versatile, and I feel like he would fit a lot of needs. Unfortunately, the Bengals only have 1 third-round pick, which is where maybe Jonah comes into play. Like if you can get an extra third or whatever, because I feel like the 2nd and 3rd round is really going to be the gold mine of this draft. After that, it kind of falls off for me. So, do you have any specific guys that you would hope the Bengals would target in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round?
Oh, well, obviously I brought up Deonte Banks as kind of my dream scenario. The way he tested like a freak and his ability to kind of mirror at the line of scrimmage is just like, it's beautiful. I mean, it's a work of art. So I like him a lot there. If Cam Smith was to fall to that back end of the 2nd round, I would love him there for them. I think I would run the car. I would trip over myself on the stage running that car.
I think that's who Paul Daner had him drafting in his mock draft today, by the way.
If it went like Darnell Wright and then Cam Smith in the 2nd, you might have to address your conversation to me with your prayers because I would just be in heaven. And if you're looking for those kind of mid-round guys, I guess like a Julius Brents, a Keely. I'm going to ask you a question because you said you like corners. I'm going to ask you 2 questions after I just run through a little bit of some of the later guys like that. Riley Moss was an intriguing guy with how he tested. If you're looking at that kind of 3rd, 4th round corner, you might be able to get. These are definitely some guys that I'd be willing to take a chance on. Again, you kind of want to stick to those early 3 or 4 rounds if you're really expecting a guy to be a contributor. And I think you brought up an excellent point that getting a guy, especially in the modern NFL, who has that slot safety versatility is extremely valuable, especially in a scheme like Lou's. And like we said, with Mike Hilton turning 30, maybe there's a little bit of a youth movement going on there. I mean, he didn't look great. He looked fine in the Buffalo game, had a lot of good tackles, did not look great in the Kansas City game.
They picked on him, man.
They did.
Kansas City always does, man. They always do. And
you can't hide from that.
Teams are going to start doing it.
Right.
Mike Hilton, that's never been his calling card, though. And I'm surprised it's taken this long, but I think you'll see it a lot more this year.
No, it's good. So let me flip this on you real quick because there's two prospects that I'm very interested on.
Okay.
Manuel Forbes, right, with his size. I've seen some people mocking him in the 1st round. I've seen some people saying him over Deonte Banks. I want to ask you about him, and I want to ask you about where you place Clark Phillips and Keely Ringo as well as 2 guys. One guy has great tape and tested really poorly, and the other guy has great measurables, but the tape is a little bit concerning sometimes. So I'll let you talk about them real quick.
Tio, I'm gonna let you think for a second. I just need to say one thing. Keely Ringo may have the worst hips I've ever seen. It is ridiculous.
So tightly wound.
He can't get it. It blows my mind that he played corner at Georgia when they have all these freaks and he can't get around.
It scares me, terrifies me.
So Tio, go ahead. I just had to get it.
I think that's funny you said that because I was gonna say I like 2 out of 3. So I really do. I like Phillips and I like oh my god, blank Forbes. Yeah. I really like Forbes. I think Forbes. I know he's small. I feel like he could probably
like
put on
less
weight.
than 1 percentile small, like literally the 0th percentile. So do you take that at the back end of the 1st round? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
Oh, I don't know.
Round guy.
He's not feeling that rich.
Yeah, I'm not feeling 28 great. Like if you trade back into the 40s and you could snag him into the 40s, I'd be cool with that. I think he's going to be a fine corner. Once he gets on the NFL regimen where he can get, lifting weights, eating healthy, he could probably put on 20 pounds. I would like to see if he had his
pro day.
Yeah, has he had his pro day yet?
Yeah, actually, let me pull that up real quick. I got it. You go ahead and keep talking. I got you.
Yeah, so I just think I feel like he could be one of the better cornerbacks in this one. I do like Banks, like you said. I think Witherspoon's the best by far. And then after Joe Goodberry shared something with us too, he played like 75% of his snaps in man, and that's
a dream corner, but he ain't getting out of the top.
No, he would no way he would.
Oh man, that guy's a bulldog.
Yeah, and same thing with Gonzalez. Like those guys aren't going to be there, not even close. But I like Forbes, man. I think he can do some good things, and he did it. Going up against pretty good competition, and he still held his own. Clark Phillips, I haven't watched a lot about him, but to me, he seems good too. He seems like a good man. He seems like he has the good instincts. And really for me, with cornerbacks, I just need you to have ball skills. If you have ball skills, I can work with you. So if you don't have ball skills, I'm really out on you right away. And like Willie said, Ringo doesn't do it for me. But if they draft Ringo, guess who's going to be his biggest fan?
Hopefully, Lou can loosen up those hips, put some WD-40 in them or something.
Or just move him to safety like everyone's going to anyway.
Maybe, yeah. So Forbes weighed in at 170 at his pro day, which, is more, but, you still want to get a little higher. He did not opt to run. He let his pro day, his combine numbers stand. Probably a better idea.
What did he weigh at the combine, 166?
I think it was, 166.
So he put on 4 pounds and 2-3
could have been out in the parking lot, slugging those Krispy Kremes and drinking the gallon of water. But I just don't feel comfortable with him in that first round with that red flag. No. Just like if you had a guy who didn't test, that's not a first round guy, right? Because that's where you take the guys without the question marks.
Someone gave me a comp to him today. I think it was Chad Forbes actually. He said he kind of reminds him of Devonte Smith from the Eagles. He's like, if you have the skill,
that is fascinating.
I was like, that's kind of interesting because Devonte Smith came in small and is still small and he's still producing. So if you have it, you have it. You know what I mean?
If you're the best player out there, it doesn't matter that you're smaller. If you're, I understand that.
The injury concern. He does play corner though, so that helps. If he was a linebacker, 40 pounds underweight, then you're concerned, but. I don't know. I'm cool with him if not at 28, but yeah, I'm with you.
Right. Okay. I was just interested to hear your thoughts because those are 3 kind of really polarizing guys that I've seen in almost any order. So as a big DB aficionado, I always say you can never have enough DBs. So I'm always
in the bio. Oh, I see
it there. Where is
I believe
Phillips? Where's Phillips projected to go? Like second, third?
Generally, second or third. It's tough, man. Because with his, I can't remember what his testing was. I remember I was with Malik and Daniel in Indy. We were watching it when we were at Prime, and I was like, oh my gosh, like Clark Phillips' testing numbers were that bad. Like, let me pull up his RAS.
Yeah, and his tape looks good too in man and zone.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. His vertical was only 33 inches. Obviously, he's undersized. He's 5'9", 184. Yep. And you're talking the thing is, if you're going to be an undersized guy, you have to test like at least an elite athlete or at least
that's the huge
average athlete. Kent Leaf, the math bomb, shout out the guy who does the relative athletic scores.
Yeah, Kenley Pallet.
Yes, sir.
He's amazing. So before the combine started, he kind of just did a quick study of, hey, what is the distribution of athletes in the NFL? And it was like 80% of them were above average or greater. And to be an undersized guy testing with an RAS of 3.3 out of 10, you're an undersized guy testing like a below average athlete. And despite the ball production and the tape being good, that's just enough of a red flag for me. Like you said, push him down to the back end of the second round or third. And as much as I don't like to hear it, Malik keeps looking at me and going, they like Clark Phillips. They like
he's a Bengals guy.
Do they move him to the slot though for him being 5'9"? That just screams slot to me.
I don't know. It concerns me enough. I know that
Could you imagine him going against T. Higgins? Oh my god.
Can you imagine Emmanuel Forbes going against T. Higgins, man, trying to press him?
I'd watch that. That sounds funny.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that'd be a fun camp battle. Yeah. But no, I just, Clark Phillips, man, his testing is tough, man. I think that puts him in the third round in my book.
Yeah.
All right, boys, we've gone over 30 minutes already.
Damn.
I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up for now. And we'll have to have you back on because this was a whole lot of fun. Again, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Evan McPhillips, correct?
At E. McPhill. I got to make it difficult for you guys.
There we go. At E. McPhill. Still, actually less letters.
Yeah. Shorten it up. My little typing, it's annoying. Type my name all the way out. So
yeah. Well, check out the Sit Down. Again, presented by First Star Logistics and the Right Way Network. Evan McPhillips, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. And we'll wish you a hearty hoo-day.
Hey, appreciate you guys.
Hoo-day.
Thank you for having me on.
Sir.